Hi and welcome to another Tabitha's Glass Emporium YouTube video. Today I want to talk about this little kind of bird's nest using weaving. It's a nice simple little project that I hope you'll enjoy. So we need to think about weaving. There's lots of great resources out there of how to do weaving. A couple of YouTube videos I've had a look at. There's also a gentleman who does ebooks. I think he shows how to do weaving with fibre paper. That could be a useful one to check out. Lots of different ways of doing it. I personally use these therefor posts that are just kiln washed, and then you cut your strips. Now honestly, your strips could be any size. You could do weaving with pieces this big. It depends what effect you personally want. You could do thin strips and bigger strips. You could be like me who doesn't necessarily think about cutting anything the same size because I'm not very good at it, so that's slightly thicker than that, and I just literally cut them as I felt like. Cut strips you're comfortable with. If you find it hard cutting little strips, cut thicker strips, doesn't matter. And I'm showing you this is for two projects, and you'll just, this little bit of this video will be in both ones because, you know, film it once, it's there twice. So either for the basket or the egg nest, you're going to do the same. You're cutting strips. I chose various different coloured browns. I chose some sienna, some woodland, some cinnabub, some tan. This is tan irid. It's quite nice for having a little bit of irid in there as well. So you're just going to cut your strips. You're going to put them on here, and you basically want these about the same sort of width apart as the mould. So, you know, it's even a bit further apart. So I think these are about 1 inch each. Unfortunately, I have bought a mat that's in inches. Does my head in. So a bit over 2 centimetres, 2.5 centimetres for those of you guys who are in metric. And then you're going to leave the space apart, and then you literally put them on. Now, overhang at this end, if you can imagine it's going down, and it's going to go down at that end. You want enough of an overhang at each end for the piece to finish. If you get to the stage when you're weaving and you find it difficult to weave, it's probably because you've got too much on the end here, which means that this, your bottom bit, is being pushed too high. I'll try and do it. If you can imagine, that would be your bottom bit here because of the length. And here, this is your bottom bit. And then there's no hole to go through. So all you need to do is trim off a bit here. And hey presto, you're back in business. So just watch out for that. If you're having problems, it might be that your ends are too long and you just need to trim them off. So just this will go into slump. I'll put the slump I've used in there. It's also, you know, you slump it hotter, you get more wiggles. Actually, these were two slumped on 2 different firings. That was fired hotter, that was fired less hot. I will give you the schedule for firing hotter because it's a bit better. But in the end, when it's all flattened, it all flattens out the same. So there you go. That's my version of weaving, and we will now move on to how I've used it. So to create the nest shape, I've laid these out, and I'm just going to kind of, with a Sharpie, draw where I want to cut them off because I'm trying to create a sort of circle. So it's going to come sort of around like this. Like this. That one's about right anyway. And then that's probably good. And then these ones I'm just going to cut off to create my circle. And I might put one more like so. So I'm just going to cut these into a circle shape. So I've cut all this into a circle, and I've threaded the cross pieces through. Now I want to put it just at a slight angle, so I'm just, as you can see, I've just sort of twisted it slightly so that it's on a diagonal, just because I want a sort of a slightly less regimented shape. Now I pre-fused some eggs with some powder on. I was doing a project the other day with these eggs for the basket, and I just pre-fused them, egg shape, a bit of powder on top, and I'm going to put them in the nest like this. So then this will all go in on a tack fuse and be tacked together, and then we can see how it is when it comes out. So here is the little nest out of the kiln. I like the kind of off-centre lines. It gives a kind of nice feeling to it. So guys, I have these, which I did a fantastic course with a woman called Lisa Pettibone some time ago, which is about making your own slumping moulds. And I made these. These are slip cast slumping moulds. So I'm going to kind of lay them out in a sort of organic pattern and slump over that. The other kind of options you have are, I think Laurie Spray sells a metal, in fact I know she does because I bought it off her. So it's like metal and you can kind of mould it into any shape you want, so that's a really good option for this. Or you could just use one of those wavy moulds if you've got one of those, or just, you know, put some mounds of fibre paper underneath the bits that you want up and the bits you want down, and do it that way. So there's lots of options. This is, you know, you're just wanting a kind of organic feel. You know, the eggs are a bit off centre, so I'm gonna, you know, maybe have a bit more waves over this side and a little less over that side. And this will go in the kiln as it is now, and we'll see how it is when it comes out. So here this is out of the kiln. It didn't slump how I was totally imagining it. I thought that this would be up a bit more. But it's a kind of hard one. It's really like, what are you using this for? What are you thinking? If you want it as a bowl, then yeah, you'd need to re-slump it. So to re-slump it, you'd put it back in the kiln, you'd put the supports under here, and then you'd lift it up, putting another support underneath this bit. And it might, you might have these further out, so this would fall down a bit and this would lift up. I actually like it as a sculptural piece, maybe something that's not, you know, to be used for anything, but to sit and look beautiful. I love the irid in here. I think this really kind of lifts the whole feeling of the weave and makes it something interesting. I quite like also the eggs because they're transparent. There's a sort of, they're slightly muted, which for me works really well with this piece. It may not be what someone else would like, and then maybe you should make them with white, and then the kind of put frit on top. So it's sort of, you know, it's an entirely taste thing. The slight thing about thinking, if you did them on white, if you look in closely here, you do get this line of clear around the edge. And if they were on white, you'd get this sort of white ring around them, which for me would sort of, you know, not necessarily look how I wanted. So it's a really kind of personal taste thing with all of these. So I'm not going to re-slump it, but there are other times where I've looked at something and gone, no, I'm going to put that back in. It may have slumped slightly crooked, and you can put it back in and hopefully re-slump it again. The two options, you can try and get it back in and sort of balance it and hope it re-slumps again, or you flatten it and start from scratch. Remember, the more you're firing, the more times you could get compatibility shift. Now, if you don't know about this, I'm sure Bob Leatherbarrow talks about it in his book, which is a fantastic go-to. Everyone should get it. Brilliant, brilliant ebook. Everyone should have it. But the more times you work glass, the possibility of the compatibility could shift, which means your COE would shift slightly and glass could become incompatible. And I've learned about this from lots of different people, and there's sort of various different ideas about it. But you know, it's why with vitrigraph, I'm kind of careful that I don't want to put a vitrigraph piece in the kiln too often. I wouldn't re-pull a bit of glass again and again. We get kind of wasted at the bottom of the pots, and I could sandblast that off and re-put it in the pot. But then the problem is, if I do that, then I've worked the glass twice. You could use it in a piece, you could use it twice in a piece, you could be slumping it, and the glass has then been used many times. So you kind of do want to think about that when you're, you know, using glass, of how many firings you want it to go through. But you know, and the more times you work it, the slower you want your schedules to be. Heat it up more slowly, cool it down, and anneal it for longer. Anyway, that's me on my soapbox. But I think it's useful sometimes to give you a bit more information. Anyway, I hope you've liked this one. I think it's quite an interesting, different sort of project to try. And if you've liked this video, please subscribe.